I don't know that much about, what's it called, pop culture. Hey y'all, hi. So I have had on my YouTube channel a series called What's Cheering Me Up Right Now, which I started in 2020 as an alternative to the traditional beauty favorites video. But I haven't filmed a What's Cheering Me Up Right Now in like a year, literally a year, not like a year. I haven't filmed one in over a year. And that is because it has been a particularly tough and dark year in this world. Like, it's a particularly heartbreaking time to be a human on the planet. And even though I've been showing up as my usual self to film beauty videos, which I love doing, behind the scenes, I have been living with a very heavy heart. So every time I've thought about it, it's like the words cheering me up turn to ashes in my mouth because things have not cheered one up, so to speak, I feel, this year. And it just hurt too much to even think about saying that. But I have still been consuming various kinds of media for respite, for comfort, to keep the demons at bay. I have still been collecting a little roster of delights and gems, and I just haven't been sharing them with anybody. So I'm here with it today, not so much what's cheering me up or what has been cheering me up, but what has been shining little pinpricks of light into the darkness. And speaking of keeping the demons at bay, if our editing schedule unfolds as it should, then this video will be going up on YouTube within a week of the US presidential election. I beg of you, I beseech you to take the time to vote. And now, let us get into the meat of the video. I skipped the part of the intro where I say my name is Hannah, but that is my name. And I also am a writer, and I will link my book down below here in the meat of the video, Never Before Seen. I'll link at the top of the description box, my book. What's cheering me up right now is better if it's done regularly because I'm talking about what I am like contemporarily consuming. And I feel like that's the case for some of these things, but some of them go back in time quite far because I was like casting my mind back over the year. And there are some things that I promised to talk about way back in the day that I never came back and reported back on. And I'm going to do it in this video. Okay. When we get to the book section, I'm going to do it. Never fear. But we're starting with entertainment and starting with one that does go all the way back well over a year ago and is a thread threading itself all the way through to the present day. So it's the perfect one with which to start. Brian Jordan Alvarez, a comedian whose work I have been following for years, absolutely years. It was originally just that he was doing, well, he had done other things. I learned about him because he was doing these bits on, I guess, TikTok, but I was watching them on Instagram and on YouTube Shorts. Originally Instagram, and then I think they started getting posted on YouTube Shorts when YouTube Shorts became a thing. Or maybe he was posting them as really short YouTube videos. I think that was what it was. He's just using, I think, a Snapchat filters to create characters, silly characters. It's like the characters doing a video log or something, or the characters talking to his or her fans like through social media. I'm realizing that for a lot of these things, I'm just going to have to link them and you'll have to go click on it and see what I'm talking about. And with Brian Jordan Alvarez, you definitely should. I feel like I actually talked about this part of his work in a past What's Cheering Me Up Right Now years ago. They're all so brilliant. Southern Aunt is one of his characters, one of my favorites. Marnie is one of his characters, one of my favorites. I'm such a passionate Brian Jordan Alvarez fan, was already, that my sister got me a cameo for Christmas a couple of years ago from Marnie. So I have this Marnie cameo that I actually posted on my Instagram, and I will link that. It's like Brian Jordan Alvarez as Marnie sending me a Christmas message from my sister years before he started blowing up in a new way, which is what has recently happened. The thing that is great about him, I should say, before I go on to talk about all of the recent work, is he's an actor and he's just unhinged. He's like one of these people whose entire body is like a hole punched through from this world to the next. There's a hole punched through the membrane between the divine and the world that we're living in, and that hole is punched through Brian Jordan Alvarez's body. And like divinity is flooding into our world from the next world through him. And I feel like he's achieved that by just letting, I mean, he's very talented, obviously, but he's talented in this way that has to do with being like a vibrational instrument of humanity, right? Because with caricature and with character, you're incredibly observant and imitative of the nuances of the way that people talk and the way that they behave and the way that they look and glance. You're channeling all of humanity, or at least Brian Jordan Alvarez is, channeling all of humanity and then like reconfiguring and broadcasting and making spectacular, and in his case, like spectacularly humorous, but it's lit up by the level of reality, the level of realism. And that comes from talent. And again, it also just comes from this kind of tuning fork of brilliant life force that he is. I just feel this way about him. And this has come up on What's Streaming Up Right Now before, right? I don't know that much about, what's it called? Pop culture. Like, I don't know that much about pop culture. It's a very niche interest. There are a lot of famous actors, especially as I've gotten older, and a new bunch of actors have come onto the scene. And I don't know their names and faces in it. And I'm just incredibly like under a rock. I'm not well versed in pop culture. And I don't watch that many movies actually, or that much television. So I'm not one of these mega fangirls spreading myself all over the place, right? But when I find a specific person or somebody's work specifically that I think is singing on this like vibrational plane, I become so passionate about it, such a passionate advocate. And that's how I literally was about Brian Jordan Alvarez years ago. And my close friends can tell you, I would be like sending the links to the little short, you know what I would always do with them? I would be like rickrolling people with them. I would just send somebody like a disguised link to one of Brian Jordan Alvarez's Southern Aunt bits, or this one where he's like your Southern restaurant manager tearing through the restaurant being like, I'm not putting up with it today. Like that. I would just like send someone the bit.ly link to that just so they would have to click on it to find out what it was. And then it's only 30 seconds long. So then by that time they've had to watch it. A lot of people in my life were on the receiving end of that, and Marnie as well. Also back then, I watched the web series that Brian Jordan Alvarez made, The Gay and Wondrous Life of Caleb Gallo, which I might have talked about on What's Cheering Me Up Right Now years ago. And I hope I did. And I hope you all went and watched it. And so we're all like on the same page, right? I turned you into mega fans and we're all on the same page. If not though, I'll link that as well. Definitely go and watch that too. It's really, really great. Really great. Like a crime that it never got picked up by a major network or whatever. But what has happened, so that just let's move on so we don't spend the entire video talking about this one actor. His work has been cheering me up all year, and it's been in 3 phases, right? So I was already a big fan. I was already just keeping up with what he was doing. Then about a year ago, Brian Jordan Alvarez got way more famous than he already was. He had this sort of like simmering low-key notoriety. You know, one of his little bit characters, TJ Maxx, who sings songs, got virally popular for that song, Sitting. Sitting is the opposite of standing. You remember this. Like, this is very old internet news. Probably everyone else is already aware. But this is the same Brian Jordan Alvarez that I was already passionate about and that I might have already talked about, who also made The Gay and Wondrous Life of Caleb Gallo. So that's the same person. That was such a delightful time of life to be a denizen of the internet in any capacity, right? Because everybody was making versions of the song. Everybody was getting in on it. It was so unserious, and yet the commitment level was so high. And it was really like that, like letting go and channeling that I believe that this actor is doing, and that's what's making his work all like turn to gold. It was like spreading out through the universe, and it was so fun to watch, especially as someone who's already a fan. So that was really good. Then the news, well, I think maybe this news had already come out, but we got closer and closer to the launch date of his show, The English Teacher, which this is really exciting, right? Because someone who has previously just been doing only his own work under his own steam on the internet, just to an audience of internet fans, got a show that's on Hulu and Disney Plus, and that was so exciting, and it is so good. So the main point of including Brian Jordan Alvarez in this part of the video is to say that now there's something you can go like watch on a network that's a television show, half-hour episodes, like a situational comedy. It's so good, and it's him he's like playing a serious character in it, you know. So it's funny because I know how unhinged he is, and then he helped write it and put it together. He created it with a team and cast himself as like the leading character. So he's just a little bit more the straight man. Like he plays the straight man, although not really, you know, but the kind of pole at the center of the show. And it's amazing to see him really pull it together and play this like down the middle character. Although I guess he did that in Caleb Gallo too. But I really recommend watching The English Teacher because it deals with contemporary issues in a very funny, fresh, balanced, and nuanced way. Every minute is fun. So that's really been cheering me up. That was already cheering me up. And then Brian Jordan Alvarez started doing a TikTok trend. And I don't know. I am not on TikTok. I don't know. Somebody called it something really funny lately in my life. And I can't remember what it was. It was like Clip Clop or something. Like somebody called it Clip Clop or something. I don't know anything about Clip Clop. and I never watch it and I never go there. So I'm just getting secondhand clip clop on Instagram. Brian Jordan Alvarez started doing a clip clop sound, a viral sound where you dance to this sound. Anyway, it's the sound from Gilmore Girls with this Ollie Alexander song, I Love Your Daughter, what do you have to offer her? Nothing, only this, and then dancing to the Ollie Alexander song. You either know what I'm talking about already or you will go and watch it. I'm not going to try to explain it further than this, but I will link a good example down below. And because of the aforementioned life force of glitter and magic, I believe, shining from Brian Jordan Alvarez, there's something about his rendition of this meme because his dancing is so unfettered. There's something about it where people watching it who don't know anything about him, don't know his work, haven't watched him dance before, haven't watched any of his work before, any of his character bits, just in this 15-second or however long it is Instagram meme clip, people are hooked into his magic. His version of that meme has gone viral, mega viral, millions of people. And he keeps doing it every single day, another one, and on all of them just saying, go watch English Teacher. It's it's just the advertising for his show on Hulu, and it is driving people to actually go and watch the show. Just like everything he's always done, it's just cheering me up beyond reason. Literally, I feel crummy, and I just go and watch one or two of those, and I feel like everything is going to be okay again. It's levity, right? It's levity in the face of everything. And this kind of, I feel emotional about it actually, because of course he's so funny and brilliant. It's great, but it's more than that. It's the archetypal role of the jester, kind of the approach that everything is a hoax, kind of, and we have veils before our eyes. And if you can just see through for a minute, if you can just see through and go to a place of that brilliant shining light, or just go to a little bit of a place of lightness, it's something spiritual. I feel it's quite spiritual. And some people are able to just unlock that in themselves and then kind of unlock it in other people. And I feel like that is kind of what's happening through the internet, through this bizarre digital medium that we have that's very difficult to navigate and kind of difficult to communicate authentically through, actually. I am just finding myself very healed and delighted by the work of this one content creator. And I wanted to share it with you because that is what we're here for. That is what's cheering me up is all about. And now let's move on to another topic about which I'm equally passionate. The more I work on social media, the harder it gets to open up about what I really love. And so I've been a little bit dreading this, and now I'm in it and I'm starting to see how great the list is, and I'm starting to get enthusiastic about it again because I'm so excited for you all to go watch English Teacher. And I am so excited to share Matt Bernstein's podcast with you, although a lot of you probably already watch it and listen to it. So my brilliant friend, who I am proud to say is an actual real friend in real life, Matt Bernstein, who does this amazing work on Instagram. And you've probably seen it, right? You've probably seen these beautiful infographics with a watercolory blue to pink background explaining the nuances of contemporary issues with beautiful visuals, impeccable grammar, to the point language, holding the complexities of something while also clarifying all at once. I mean, he just does a brilliant job sharing information and clarifying information on social media. Again, it's navigating this dubious medium that we've been served in the most elegant way. I absolutely love his work on Instagram. And I had only known his work on Instagram for a while. We had followed each other for a long time, but hadn't met in person yet. And then recently we did get to hang out in person. And that was magical. That's kind of side note, but it definitely cheered me up. However, it's not mainly that I'm here to tell you about today, because this is the thing. I am not a podcast girly. Have I shared this before? I do not listen to podcasts. The world has been swept away by podcasts, and I've just been left on the shore alone, being ain't nobody got time for that. Just never been able to get into it. And that's why it took me so long to even try. But Matt, I love his work so much that I tiptoed into the podcasting world to listen to his podcast, which is called A Bit Fruity. I went to listen to it just a few months ago, and it's so good. And again, I don't really listen to podcasts. I don't have much context, so forgive me for that. But I think this is brilliant. And I watch them on YouTube, and so you can see Matt and his guest talking. You can also listen to them, and it's perfectly fine. But I really like watching them on YouTube. But I'll put them on when I'm doing something. Classic podcast behavior, classic podcast listener now. now. That's me. I'll like put it on while I'm cooking, but I usually have it up so I can also see, and I can see what Matt's makeup looks like. So it's always creative and impeccable. I can, see the guest, see the vibe of the guest, which is always enjoyable. I think the first one I ever listened to and watched, an episode about Ozempic with Aubrey Gordon from Maintenance Phase. So good. Together, I mean, they're both brilliant. Together, they were so good. It's so fun to listen to. And that's maybe a really good entryway. A couple of brilliant episodes with Natalie from ContraPoints about J.K. Rowling, one about Iman Khalif with Natalie. Those were also really wonderful to listen to. The thing that's so great, and this is the thing, it's not just a podcast, but it's like contemporary issues, which if you've watched What's Cheering Me Up Right Now before, you know that I tend in this video to give you a list of like very escapist stuff. I'm over here watching like Disney films, 2 things from now there is like an animated film. So hold on, it's coming. Or it'll be like fantasy novel. You know what I mean? Like I am really over here escaping in my private time. So not only has Matt pulled me into the world of podcasting, but also into the world of like listening to podcast media about contemporary issues. It's just that the way that Matt handles the issues with the guests he invites, the guests are always so well informed, but also the humanity in the way that both of them always handle the issues is so refreshing, and handle the people about whom they're talking. And by that, I mean, there's always a sense of balance. The bottom line is always compassion. There's always a return to the idea like, well, these people doing this confusing thing or this hurtful thing, they must have a reason for being that way. It must have come from somewhere, empathy with that, while also saying, and it's totally not okay and it's very damaging. And like, let's talk about all of those facets. There's nuance. They go into the gray area. There's a lot of humor. It makes it approachable and stomachable and enriching in a way that so much media that's about contemporary issues doesn't, because it does the opposite. It flattens it, makes it black and white, makes it us against them, makes it feel disgusting, makes me feel like I want to crawl under a rock and just watch Pixar movies, So it's not just that it's fun to listen to. It's not just that A Bit Fruity is fun to listen to because it's like, it's funny and they're clever and all of this stuff. It's that I feel like finally finding a voice that handles contemporary issues with this kind of compassion, but also from a place of, I feel, infallible moral compass. Like really a strong sense of what's right and the bravery to stand up for it and articulate that. I mean, that's also important. It's not just like floating. It's not just like in the podcast, they're like floating in the gray area being like, everything's okay. That's not what I mean. It's just takes on issues, but a cradle of compassion to hold all of the nuance and the humor and the takes and the feelings, and also intellectual unpacking in the case of many guests and also of Matt, very well researched and very well informed unpacking of these issues, held in a cradle of thoughtful compassion. And that it just makes it feel like we're getting somewhere. And I really need that. I feel like I'm going to cry again. Anyway, go listen to A Bit Fruity or watch it on YouTube. I will link it down below. And I love Matt. I am also listening to another podcast. I love how I'm over here being like, I'm so cool for listening to podcasts. I'm so with it. I am basically Gen Z now because I listen to podcasts, which is like actually the opposite. Like my dad listens to podcasts. I just have always felt like I'm not cool because people are like, oh, what podcast do you listen to? I'm like, Katya, the drag queen, has I think, pretty new podcast on the Grindr channel, like Grindr YouTube channel, but you can also listen to it, I think, on Spotify through the Grindr channel, interviewing people. And I've listened to every episode. I am over here getting so much housework done because I listen to podcasts now. Only these 2, though. I only listen to Matt's and Katya's podcast. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to branch out. So maybe curate your podcast suggestions for me. And by that, I mean, don't just like give me the suggestion of every podcast you've ever loved. Okay. A thoughtful, curated trickle of podcast suggestions is what I will be able to stomach in the comments based on what you know of me, based on the 2 that I now religiously listen to. It's Katya interviewing other famous people basically about whatever she feels like, because it'll just start off with general topics of conversation and then about like just a lot of detail about people's lives, which is, of course, riveting. And then because the concept of the podcast is, are you the ass? wading into these scenarios that might be considered morally gray and kind of like trying to talk about who is in the right and who isn't in those scenarios. But it's all in good fun. And it's really all about Katya's personality and the personality of the guest, which is just, that's the magic, right? Is when an interviewer has the ability to draw someone out and is also themselves very delightful. And it just ends up being like a coffee shop conversation that you wish you could have been a part of, but you are a part of it because you're listening to it on a podcast. I really love Katya, have for a long time, and I'm really enjoying this Grindr podcast. And I'm so pleased to be able to share with you my podcast listening habits. Okay, moving on. I recently watched Inside Out 2 on a plane, and it's so good. I had already seen Inside Out 1, of course. It's great. The thing that's notable about Inside Out 2, the Pixar movie, do I even need to say what it is? I mean, it's a movie that personifies the emotions as little people inside of a little girl who in Inside Out 2 is like going through puberty. And so a lot of it happens inside of her with these characters. The thing about it is that it's not just the emotion, the characters as the emotions, like joy and sadness are the two main characters. It sounds actually so cheesy and terrible when you say it out loud. I actually feel I'm in the camp that you should not try to explain Inside Out to anyone because it'll make them not want to see it, but everyone should see it because it deals not only with the sort of front-facing emotion, the characters of the emotions, but also in a gloriously metaphorical way with the subconscious and the sense of identity and the way that life experience forges a person's sense of self. I was saying I watched Inside Out on the plane and I started crying like at the first scene. I didn't cry or I did a little bit later at the like emotional resolution, right? It is emotional, but the real waterworks started just when the movie opened and I got back in touch with the premise, which is this metaphor. And when I started to see the way that Inside Out 2 is going to kind of deepen and add nuance to the metaphor of the human experience and interiority, it's just so healthy and so true that it made me, as they say, ugly cry on the plane. And the drinks cart came by and I was like, can I just have some napkins? It's fine. It was fine. And I just highly recommend it. Okay, so that's everything that I have for entertainment. That's all of the like movies and shows and stuff. And I'm okay. I've been filming for half an hour. So we're probably still within the realm of reasonable. Although I think I talked about Brian Jordan Alvarez for like a full 25 minutes. But that's also okay. He deserves it. Honestly, he effing deserves it. Music. Chappell. It just has to be said, okay? And I know that I spent a lot of the first part of the video being like, I was the Brian Jordan Alvarez fan before he had a show on Hulu, before he got famous, whatever. That's not quite how I meant it. I just meant it's that much more delightful when someone you've been following for a long time starts to do bigger and bigger things, especially when you feel that person, you are in touch with their brilliance and you're like, what the world needs now is more of this. That's how I feel. I've always felt this way about Brian Jordan Alvarez. What the world needs now is more of this, and how the world is getting more of it. So that makes it particularly exciting. Not to be that person, okay? But the same is kind of true with Chappell Roan, but I don't have myself to thank for it. It's my sister who, I don't know how she's like a lawyer. I don't know how she's so in touch with what's cool and good. Maybe she has like younger people at her firm who tell her what's cool, whereas I'm just out here like alone making videos and I don't know what's cool. But she, well over a year ago, you've seen the Chappell Roan chart, I'm sure you have, of her listens on Spotify for followers, like just being a little trickle and then suddenly going up to like 40 million or whatever. Literally like at the way back beginning of that trickly chart, like when it was just an inch of people listening. And I remember because it was when I was like halfway through my pregnancy. Ellie was like, you're listening to Chappell Roan, right? And I was like, no. She's like, Hannah, you've got to listen to Chappell Roan. Are you kidding me? You're going to love it. So I went home that night and I remember putting on Chappell Roan and listening and being like, this is so great. And I was like, I was becoming this kind of, I was going into like a little hibernation mode. I don't know. I was becoming an egg, you know, this was just how this pregnancy that I went through was for me. I don't necessarily say that this like this for everyone or that every pregnancy is like this. Okay. As I got more and more pregnant, loud noises sounded louder to me. Smells were stronger. I just became a little bit more, I was listening to like dreamy Gregorian chant and just being like, oh, I was not over here being like HOTTOGO. You know what I mean? I was just like, time. So I listened to Chaperone and I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. And I can't wait to return to it when the baby's on the outside and I'm kind of like coming back to a little bit more robust of a relationship with the world, right? So I put a pin in it. Then when that happened, the baby was on the outside and he was just a couple, maybe 4 months old or something. One day I was driving to my sister's house, which is just far enough away that I was able to listen to the whole album. And I was like, I'm going to give Chappell another try. So I turned on the album and that was when I really got it. The Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess. I mean, everybody knows it. It's almost absurd for me to even mention Chappell and What's Cheering Me Up right now, because you all already know. You did not hear it here first. She's had like the trajectory and then like a full arc and come around again. Like everything is happening. It's great. I love to see it. I'm very excited. Just like with Brian Jordan Alvarez. It's really exciting. But at this time, it hadn't quite started yet. I listened to the whole album on the way. And when I got to Pink Pony Club, I was like, slain. It's so good. And I got to Ellie's house and I was like, Chaperone is so amazing. And she was like, I know. So I got her like the limited edition LP for her birthday. That was really exciting. I may have also gone on to get one for myself. And then she became spectacularly famous. I don't even think I need to say why the music is great because again, we all know. The thing is just, I am just so happy that we now live in a world where Chaperone is the most famous musical artist of the year. Like, I'm so happy that it's happening. That, again, I was like, the world needs more of this. The whole world needs this. And then the whole world was like, yeah, we want it. And it's just awesome. It is awesome. And that has really cheered me up. I mean, the music itself originally was what was cheering me up for part of the year. And then to see her meteoric rise. I know there's been drama. I don't care about that. It's just it's fine. There's always going to be stuff like that and people are always going to talk about it. But what matters is this brilliant musical artist getting her due, getting her flowers, getting the level of fame that she deserves. It's so good to see. And I cannot wait to see what she comes up with next. Okay, the time has come, the walrus said, to face the music and talk about the trashy books that I read now like over a year ago. It's been so long since I promised to tell you. I'm going to tell you. This is what happened. Books. We're talking about books. Simbri is to blame for all of it. My wonderful friend, my dear close friend Simbri, who has a brilliant Instagram account, which I will link down below. I do recommend following her. Simbri was like, Hannah, you have to read Fourth Wing. And you know, I love a piece of literature. I also love a fantasy novel. I require at least some level of integrity, like some level of quality of the writing most of the time. Fourth Wing, here's what happened. I was like, okay. I went and I started reading it. Gosh, it's been a long time, so I can only give you like the vaguest overview, and also my criticism of the writing itself would have been more incisive if I had filmed this 9 months ago, which I should have done. The plot is so gripping. It's a fantasy, right? So it's world build. There's all this world building. It's set in a dragon war college. It's a school setting. It's academia, sort of. There are also dragons. We love to see it. And it's like a cutthroat situation where a lot of people don't make it through. Like a lot of people don't live through the training to become a dragon rider. There is a little bit of sleight of hand with the world building there. Like there are some things on a large scale that don't really add up and don't really make sense about the world. And I just had to kind of swallow that. There are some tics in the sentence structuring that I also had to just live with. But I lived with it because the plotting is so gripping and I just immediately was sucked into it. And it just sweeps you along. It is relentless and it's quite beefy. So it was really fun to like get into it, get really into the story, get really into what was going to happen. It was just what I needed at the time. I do recommend Fourth Wing. However, I got like 2/3 of the way through so I knew already that it was kind of like an enemies to lovers thing because I think it says that on the cover, which is sort of annoying. I wish that they would have just held that information back from the cover because I sort of knew. And it would have been nice not to know. So it's enemies, enemies, enemies. And then we get into the lovers part and it's like extremely graphic. And I was like, Simbri, is this a romance novel? Like full on? It kind of is. She tricked me. They all tricked me. Simbri, the writer of Fourth Wing, all two of them, they tricked me into reading this like sex book, which is fine. I'm not against it. I mean, I'm the one listening to the Grindr podcast. It's just, I was into it, but I would not have chosen to get into it if I had known what it was, you know? But then since I was in it, I was into it. So I read it and I can't say I don't recommend it, honestly. And here's what happened. I finished it. There's also a second one now, like Fourth Wing, the sequel has come out. It's okay. It's a great like beach read or vacation read, airplane read, like really gripping. You will be in its grip. And it's great to have a book like that in your back pocket. And this is a book like that. I got to the end of it and I was like, it's over. And now it's released me from its grip. I'm still in its grip, but there's no more to read, right? And it's like a cliffhanger. So on my Kindle, the Kindle was like, readers who enjoyed Fourth Wing also enjoyed this. And that's right, my friends. It was ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, the one, the only Sarah J. Maas. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'll try it. It's not bad. It's not so there's literature. It's not that. And then there are all of these books that have been my pleasure reading for a lot of my adult life, which are like literary historical fiction or like literary mysteries where it's not the same as literature, but it's very close to the line. And there are a lot of the same standards are there in terms of like character building, especially in terms of the style of the prose, the subtlety of the messaging, the pacing, like all of that is highly valued. So I'm thinking of something like the Three Pines Mysteries by Louise Penny, which I've talked about before. They're just really well written, really well done, not a hair out of place, like impeccable, you know? And the plot is also gripping, but it's like the characterization is incredibly deep, again, grounded in humanity. And it's like you are sort of opening like rooms and spaces into your own connection to humanity through it, which is like what great literature does, even though it's just on this side of the line between like murder mysteries and actual literature, you know? So that's like been my entire purview. Over here, we have ACOTAR. It's like crack cocaine. It is like, it's still reading books, you know what I mean? But it's just like a candy version, which is just to say that everything, the characterization, the plot, everything is designed to just drive you through at a rapid rate of speed. Like you're inhaling the entire story. Like everything's designed to just make you like inhale the entire story, going and going and going at the expense of some of those subtler points. And of course, it's just as sexy, right? It's also got that as well. Everything that makes a book, like the literary version of crack cocaine, is in these books. And there's this fantasy world. So I proceeded to blaze through every book in the ACOTAR series and all the other things she's written as well, except for the Throne of Glass. I couldn't get into Throne of Glass. It was just not good. I read the first one. I felt it was not good. A Court of Thorns and Roses and its 4 books that come after it. And then the Crescent City ones, which I really loved as well. When I was reading these, I remember thinking about what I would say and what's cheering me up right now. And it was just, again, I had a lot more of a robust critique like to give. I had a lot to say at the time. And now it's just kind of in the past because it's been like a year since I read them. And it's probably for the best, right? Because it's kind of a niche, sort of a niche thing. Although I know a lot of people have read them or are reading them. I knew I had to confess at some point in the past, I kind of indicated that I was reading this type of thing. And I just wanted you to know that is what it is. It is what it was. You all knew what it was who have read it. You all knew, and it is what it was. Now I'm reading something that's a little bit more like the first thing I described, that it tends to be the kind of popular fiction that I read. Anthony Horowitz, who wrote Magpie Murders, has this quirky series, Horowitz and Hawthorne, where it's like he places himself as the modern day Watson / Conan Doyle to a modern day Sherlock Holmes, but in a really unexpected way. That's so fun. Like he's written himself into the books as a writer who's writing about a detective, and it's just like contemporary detective fiction. There are 5 of them. They're so fun to read. And that's the kind of thing that I usually recommend, that I usually read. If you usually enjoy what I recommend books wise and the breathless, like shirtless experience of, what's it called? Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing is its own thing. I feel like Sarah J. Maas is like a better writer, actually. I think I would probably actually recommend ACOTAR, even though it's like a whole thing. I would probably recommend it first. Fourth Wing, though, is even more drug-like of an experience, I would say. I actually do recommend them. But if that all sounds terrible, it's like fantasy. I didn't even say what A Court of Thorns and Roses is. Just look it up, okay? I'll link it. Fantasy books. If that sounds bad to you, try Hawthorne and Horowitz. Okay, last thing on the list, some habits. What's cheering me up right now, I originally conceived of it as like a favorites video where instead of talking about like, this is my favorite lip gloss, this is my favorite body wash, which is like what favorites traditionally are on beauty YouTube. Instead of that, we'll talk about what it is in my life that's not stuff that you buy that I think is actually improving the quality of my life and the day-to-day. So things like media, of course, are relevant to that, like the things that I've been talking about, but even more relevant are like lifestyle habits. And so I always put a couple of those in. Since I got it together after the hardest of the postpartum months, I've been dressing better than I ever did before, I feel. As someone who works from home, I've just been getting it together more and more frequently. And it's partly because I understand my aesthetic a little bit more and my viewpoint is a little more focused now, my aesthetic viewpoint for fashion. It's something I've been talking about in a lot of videos. Basically, what it is that I've been talking about in those videos, the recent video about my Pinterest board, the upcoming video about my capsule wardrobe, all of that, it actually has had bearing on the quality of my life. It's really made me feel more together, feel more present. I feel like a habit that I'm developing is just dressing better in my adult life. And it's significant enough of an upgrade that it deserves a spot in what's cheering me up right now. I just love being a bit more put together, even if I'm just working at home. And I recommend it in the way that people say, like, you should make your bed every day, no matter what. It's like, yeah, make your bed and get dressed. For me, getting dressed has been fundamental, especially in the past couple of months. Another thing that Joe and I have recently done, a little tweak that we've recently made, we've been scrambling to get to a place where we have enough time to do the amount of work we need to do to feasibly make the channel run for us to make a living. Like, we basically, with having a kid and moving to a new house, both of those things took such huge bites out of our capacity, our ability to work, both time-wise and energy-wise, that we found ourselves after we moved really in the hole. We were like, wow, we're way less productive than we were before. We're doing way less, and it's having a serious impact on our livelihoods, like right at the time when you can ill afford for that to happen, which is like when you just had a baby and bought a house and like moved to a new house. Since that happened and we were like, oh my gosh, we've just been doing everything we can to get the pieces to fit back together again so that we can continue to do enough work. It's been a little bit touch and go. And so in the process of that, and we're fine. We're going to be fine, especially now the ship is sort of starting to balance out again. Don't worry about us. Although if you want to contribute, you can join Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Okay? And there's actually a whole bunch of old videos on there you could go back and watch. But we are fine, in no small part due to the people who are on Patreon, though. I mean, like, my Patreon patrons really help keep the ship sailing. So just know that. We are fine. But in the course of that, we really lost our grip on something that's always been really important to us, which is setting aside enough practical time in the day for self-care. So I was doing a thing where I was like getting up, getting the baby up, getting breakfast, and then as soon as the baby was like cleaned up after breakfast, I would like hand him off to Joe and I would immediately start working. And I like wouldn't be dressed, wouldn't have showered, wouldn't have makeup on, wouldn't have exercised, wouldn't have meditated, wouldn't have done any writing or like gotten in touch with myself at all. I would just be like, I have to edit that video. We have to get that video up. And I would start working. And then it would be like 11:45 and I would like have like a bad taste in my mouth because I hadn't like brushed my teeth that morning. And it would be time to start getting lunch ready for the baby. And I would feel like groggy and still in my pajamas. But it just felt like we were college kids pulling an all-nighter all the time because we had to be, because we were behind on work. We just constantly felt like we're behind. We're not doing enough. We have to sacrifice everything on the altar of work, which is flies in the face of everything I've ever said, either on or behind the camera, that one should do, including the bit about taking extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself. Like, we forgot because we panicked. We're like, we have to work. We have to do more. And all of that went out the window. Gosh, I feel like it was about 3 weeks ago. One day I said to Joe, I was like, I have got to start taking care of my body. I've got to start exercising a little. I've just got to start dedicating time. So I was like, I'm not going to start work so early in the morning. After breakfast, I'm going to take some time to put myself together and take care of myself and then start work, which a year ago, like, that was a given, or a couple of years ago, our entire, almost 15 years together now, that's been a given. That's how we've always functioned. We've always functioned from this place of self-care being pretty important and making sure that it's in balance. And we had just totally lost the plot. And it felt sort of rebellious at the moment to be like, I'm not going to work with every moment in the day that we have. I'm not going to start working until after I've taken care of myself a little bit. We were both like, let's try that. Like we were both like, oh my gosh, it's going to be risky because we're going to have to lose some work hours and we're already scrambling so much. But Joe immediately agreed and he was like, I'm going to do the same thing. We just need to, no matter how hard it is getting with work, no matter how behind we feel, no matter how much we feel like we're scrambling, we've got to take work off of the top peg of priority and stick it down underneath, like self-care, just basic care for the body, care for the spirit, just a little bit of ritual self-care. We have to stick it down a peg and put the other one on top because otherwise we're going to just run ourselves completely into the ground and we can't. We were already doing that. That was why I said this out of desperation. Well, my friends, let me tell you what happened. I started doing that 3 weeks ago and predictably we've been much more productive these 3 weeks because we've been more focused. We've had our brains together a little better. We've had our production meetings. Everything's just run more smoothly. I've had more capacity. Things are finally starting to get back on track. It's like that was actually the missing piece, right? Taking care of ourselves was the missing piece. Not doing it was why we were not our most effective version of ourselves. Duh. It was like I needed to take my own advice. I wasn't. For a long time, I wasn't doing it. Of all of these things on the list, except for maybe, no, they're all great. I was going to say of all of the things that on this list, this is probably the thing that's cheered me up the most. And it is probably true. I was cheekily going to say, like, except for Brian Jordan Alvarez. No, I think it is true, actually, that of all the things on this list, the thing that has had the most profound impact on my daily life is what has felt like a radical act of demoting the obsession with productivity down below the value of just self-care and balance. We saw an immediate improvement in the running of things, in the mechanisms of things. And I wanted to share that with you because I know that this is a battle that many of us fight. And frankly, showing up for work and just being able to do the project that I set out to do here, making videos about aesthetics and just still dwelling in this space here with you all, that has really helped me to center, to reorient, helped to keep me going through this challenging year. And I'm so grateful to be able to keep doing it. Thank you for being here with me for this epic What's Cheering Me Up Right Now. I hope that it cheered you up and I hope that you will enjoy some of these things that I've been enjoying. Please leave your suggestions for me in the comments down below, including your podcast suggestions. Don't forget to vote and don't forget to take extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.